Emma stood nervously in the crowded courtroom, clutching her folder of notes.
She was only 17, but today she had to be brave for her brother Thomas. The room felt huge, with its dark wood panels and high ceiling. People in suits moved around importantly, hardly noticing the young girl in her slightly too big blazer. Judge Richard Harmon sat high above everyone else. His gray hair and stern face made Emma's heart beat faster. He looked down at her with cold eyes that seemed to say she didn't belong here.
Case number 47823, Thomas Johnson, announced the clerk. Emma stepped forward with Thomas beside her.
At 19, her brother looked scared in his borrowed suit.
He wasn't a criminal, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time when the shop was robbed.
Your Honor, I'm here to represent my brother, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. The judge frowned.
Young lady, where is your lawyer? Where are your parents? My mother works 3 jobs, Your Honor.
She couldn't get time off today, but she signed permission for me to speak for Thomas.
I've prepared all the necessary.
Judge Harmon cut her off with a wave of his hand.
This is a courtroom, not a school project.
Your brother is facing serious charges that could send him to prison. He needs a real lawyer, not a child playing dress-up.
Some people in the courtroom laughed.
Emma felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she stood tall. With all due respect, Your Honor, I've studied this case thoroughly. I can show that Thomas was nowhere near.
Enough!
The judge's voice boomed across the room. I've seen this before, young people thinking they understand the law from watching television shows. The prosecutor, Mr. Phillips, smiled smugly. He was a tall man with expensive clothes who hadn't even bothered to learn Thomas's name correctly, calling him Thompson in their only meeting. Your Honor, said Mr. Phillips, perhaps we should proceed with the charges and set a trial date.
If the defendant cannot afford counsel, the court can appoint someone. The way he said someone made it clear he meant someone other than Emma.
Emma felt panic rising in her chest. The court-appointed lawyers were overworked and often spent just minutes with their clients before hearings.
Thomas would become just another file in a stack. Your Honor, please. Just give me 5 minutes to explain why Thomas couldn't have committed this crime. I have evidence.
Young lady, Judge Harmon said, his patience clearly wearing thin, this isn't how our justice system works.
Your brother needs a qualified legal representative. Your enthusiasm is noted, but this is a serious matter. Thomas whispered to Emma, it's okay. Maybe we should just do what he says. But Emma knew it wasn't okay.
Their mother was already working herself to exhaustion.
They couldn't afford a good lawyer, and Thomas was innocent. If the judge wouldn't listen now, what chance would they have later?
She thought quickly of everything that had led to this moment, the late nights studying law books borrowed from the library, the online courses she had taken secretly, the promises she had made to her family. Your Honor, Emma said, more firmly this time, I would like to request a brief recess.
The judge looked surprised at her formal language. And why should I grant that? Because everyone deserves a fair chance to present their case. Even my brother. Even me. The courtroom went quiet. Judge Harmon studied Emma's face for a long moment.
Something in her determined expression seemed to reach him.
15 minutes, he said finally. Not a minute more. As Emma turned to leave the courtroom, she caught the eye of an older woman sitting in the back row.
The woman wore a neat suit and had been watching the proceedings with great interest.
She gave Emma a small nod that somehow felt like approval.
Emma didn't know it yet, but that woman was Professor Elizabeth Adams from Oxford Law School, who had come to observe the local courts for a research project. And Emma's life was about to change forever. In the hallway outside, Emma pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She had one chance, and she knew exactly who to call. Emma paced the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear, counting the rings.
1, 2, 3. Professor Adams speaking. Emma took a deep breath. Professor, it's Emma Johnson.
I'm at the courthouse with my brother's case.
It's happening exactly as you predicted.
Judge Harmon won't take me seriously.
Where are you exactly?
The professor's voice was calm but urgent.
Courtroom B, Westfield Municipal Court. We have a 15-minute recess, but that's all. Hold your ground, Emma.
I'll be there in 10 minutes with reinforcements.
Emma ended the call and leaned against the cold hallway wall.
Her heart was racing.
She thought about how she'd met Professor Adams 3 years ago at a special weekend law program for gifted teenagers. The professor had spotted Emma's unusual talent immediately and had secretly mentored her ever since.
Thomas joined her in the hallway, his face drawn with worry.
"What's happening, Em? Who did you call?"
"Help," she said simply.
"Just trust me a little longer."
They returned to the courtroom with 1 minute to spare.
Judge Harmon checked his watch impatiently. "Well, Miss Johnson? Have you reconsidered your position?" Emma stood tall. "Your Honor, I respectfully ask for a few more minutes. I'm expecting." The heavy courtroom doors swung open. Every head turned.
Professor Elizabeth Adams strode in confidently, her sensible heels clicking on the floor. Behind her walked Dean William Preston of Cambridge Law School, easily recognizable from his frequent television appearances, and James Fletcher, one of the country's most respected barristers. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harmon's mouth fell open slightly before he composed himself.
"Professor Adams," he said, clearly recognizing her. "This is an unexpected honor. What brings you to my humble courtroom?"
The professor approached the bench with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes.
"Judge Harmon, what a pleasure.
I was in town for a conference when I received an urgent call about one of my special students."
"Students?"
The judge looked confused.
"Yes. Emma Johnson."
She gestured toward Emma, who stood a little straighter.
"I've been personally mentoring her for the past 3 years."
Judge Harmon's eyebrows shot up.
"This young lady is your student?" "Indeed.
And quite possibly the most brilliant legal mind I've encountered in 30 years of teaching."
Dean Preston stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I may?"
He placed a folder on the judge's bench.
"These are Emma's credentials and special permissions.
She completed her undergraduate degree through our distance learning program at 14.
She's currently enrolled in our advanced placement legal program."
The judge opened the folder, adjusting his glasses as he read. His expression changed from skepticism to astonishment. "But she's just a teenager," he muttered. "A teenager who wrote a paper on juvenile justice reform that's currently being cited in a Supreme Court case," Barrister Fletcher added.
"I've personally reviewed her work on her brother's case. It's exceptional."
Emma watched as Judge Harmon processed this information. The prosecutor, Mr. Phillips, leaned forward in his chair, trying to see the documents.
"Your Honor," Emma said quietly, "I understand why you were doubtful. But I've prepared thoroughly for Thomas's case. All I ask is the chance to present our defense."
The judge closed the folder and handed it back to Dean Preston.
The courtroom remained completely silent, waiting for his decision.
"Well," Judge Harmon said finally, clearing his throat.
"This is highly unusual." He looked at Emma with new eyes.
"But it seems you have the backing of some of our finest legal minds." He turned to the prosecutor.
"Mr. Phillips, do you have any objection to Miss Johnson representing her brother, given these extraordinary circumstances?" The prosecutor, clearly caught off guard, fumbled with his papers.
Well, I suppose if she has the proper credentials and permissions." "She does," Professor Adams said firmly.
Judge Harmon nodded slowly. "Very well.
Miss Johnson, you may proceed with your brother's defense."
He leaned forward slightly.
"I must say, I'm most interested to hear what you have to say." Emma felt a surge of confidence as she moved to the center of the courtroom. She opened her folder of carefully prepared notes, aware that everyone was now watching her with intense curiosity.
"Thank you, Your Honor," she began.
"The case against my brother rests on mistaken identity and rushed police work."
"If I may direct the court's attention to the security footage timestamp." As Emma began her presentation, Professor Adams took a seat in the front row, a small, proud smile on her face.
The real test was just beginning. Emma stood confidently in the center of the courtroom, her initial nervousness replaced by a quiet determination. The room had transformed from a place of mockery to one of rapt attention. Even the court reporter seemed to be typing with extra care, not wanting to miss a word. Your Honor, the prosecution claims my brother Thomas was at Wilson's corner shop at 8:15 p.m. on April 10 when it was robbed.
Their entire case hinges on this single fact.
Emma pointed to a large photograph she had placed on the evidence table.
This security camera image shows someone in a blue hoodie that the prosecution claims is Thomas.
Mr. Phillips nodded confidently. The suspect matches the defendant's height and build perfectly.
Does he? Emma asked. She pulled out a second photograph. This is an enlarged version of the same image. Note the height marker on the shop doorway. This person is 5'10". My brother Thomas is 6'2".
The judge leaned forward, studying both images carefully. Furthermore, Emma continued, the prosecution's key witness, Mr. Barker, identified Thomas from a police lineup. But Mr. Barker was not wearing his glasses during the robbery or during the identification.
Objection.
Mr. Phillips rose to his feet. The witness's eyesight was never brought into question during his statement.
Perhaps because no one asked, Emma replied calmly. She handed the clerk another document. This is Mr. Barker's driver's license, which clearly shows he requires corrective lenses.
And this, she produced another paper, is his statement to police, where he mentions that his glasses were knocked off during the robbery.
Judge Harmon frowned at the prosecutor. Mr. Phillips, were you aware of this?
The prosecutor shuffled through his papers.
That detail wasn't highlighted in my briefing, Your Honor. Professor Adams exchanged a knowing look with Dean Preston.
They had seen many cases built on such careless oversights.
Emma moved on methodically. Now to the matter of my brother's whereabouts that evening.
She placed a printed bus ticket on the evidence table. Thomas was on the 7:45 p.m. bus to Millfield to visit our grandmother, who had fallen earlier that day.
The bus company confirms he was scanned aboard.
The journey takes 50 minutes, making it physically impossible for him to have been at Wilson's corner shop at 8:15 p.m.
The courtroom grew quieter with each piece of evidence Emma presented. Thomas watched his sister with amazement.
He had always known she was smart, but this was something else entirely. And finally, Emma said, pulling out her last piece of evidence, we have this.
She held up a hospital visitor log.
Thomas signed in at Millfield General Hospital at 8:40 p.m. to visit our grandmother, Martha Johnson. This is verified by 2 nurses and the hospital security system, which requires ID scanning. Emma turned to face the prosecutor directly. Mr. Phillips, your office has built a case against my brother based on a grainy photo of someone shorter than Thomas, an identification by a witness without his glasses, and an impossible timeline.
Is this the standard of evidence the Crown typically requires before charging a young man with no criminal record?
Mr. Phillips's face had grown increasingly red. He glanced at his assistant, who shrugged helplessly. Your Honor, Emma continued, turning back to the judge, the prosecution has no physical evidence linking Thomas to this crime. No fingerprints, no stolen goods found in his possession, nothing but a case of mistaken identity.
I ask that all charges be dismissed immediately. Judge Harmon sat back in his chair, studying Emma with newfound respect. The courtroom remained silent, waiting for his response.
Mr. Phillips, the judge finally said, do you have anything to add in light of this evidence?
The prosecutor stood slowly.
Your Honor, we would like to request time to review the defense's evidence.
I'm sure you would, Judge Harmon replied dryly. However, given the clear timeline discrepancy and identification issues, I'm inclined to agree with Miss Johnson. He turned to Emma. You've presented a compelling case for your brother's innocence.
I haven't seen such thorough preparation from lawyers with decades of experience.
Emma nodded gratefully. Thank you, Your Honor.
Before I make my ruling, the judge continued, I must ask, how did you learn to prepare a legal defense at this level?
Emma glanced at Professor Adams, who nodded encouragingly. I've been studying law independently since I was 12, Your Honor.
When our father died, we had trouble with his insurance claim.
No one would help us, so I taught myself how the system works.
Professor Adams discovered me when I submitted an essay to a university competition.
She's been guiding my studies ever since.
Judge Harmon nodded thoughtfully, taking in Emma's story.
He looked at Thomas, then back at Emma, then down at the evidence before him. Everyone in the courtroom could sense a decision had been made. Judge Harmon cleared his throat and straightened his robe. The entire courtroom waited in silence.
Emma stood still, her hands clasped tightly together to stop them from shaking. This was the moment everything would change, for Thomas, for her family, perhaps for her future. In light of the evidence presented, Judge Harmon began, I find there are serious flaws in the prosecution's case against Thomas Johnson.
The timeline makes it physically impossible for the defendant to have committed this crime.
Emma felt a rush of relief wash over her, but she maintained her composure. The judge wasn't finished. Mr. Phillips, Judge Harmon continued, turning to the prosecutor, I expect better from the Crown. Rushing charges without proper investigation wastes court resources and, more importantly, can ruin innocent lives.
The prosecutor looked down at his notes, his face flushed with embarrassment. The charges against Thomas Johnson are hereby dismissed, Judge Harmon declared, bringing down his gavel with a definitive crack. The sound broke the tension in the room. Thomas jumped to his feet and hugged Emma tightly. You did it, he whispered. You really did it. Professor Adams approached them with a warm smile. Exceptional work, Emma. Simply exceptional.
But before they could celebrate further, Judge Harmon spoke again.
Miss Johnson, would you approach the bench, please? Emma walked forward, suddenly worried. Had she broken some court rule she didn't know about?
The judge lowered his voice so only Emma could hear. I owe you an apology, young lady.
I made assumptions based on your age that were completely unfounded. You've shown more legal aptitude than many professionals I see in this courtroom. Thank you, Your Honor, Emma replied quietly. May I ask what your plans are? After you complete your studies? Emma hesitated.
She had dreams, of course, but had never spoken them aloud to anyone except her mother.
I want to help people who can't afford good legal representation, Your Honor. Too many innocent people plead guilty because they can't navigate the system.
Judge Harmon nodded thoughtfully.
We need more attorneys with that mindset. He reached into his desk and pulled out a business card. My daughter runs a law clinic at the university.
They offer scholarships to promising students.
Call her. Emma took the card, stunned by this unexpected turn. I will. Thank you. As she turned to go, Judge Harmon added, and Miss Johnson? The legal profession will be better for having you in it. After they left the courtroom, reporters who had gotten wind of the unusual case were waiting. A young woman with a microphone approached. Emma Johnson? Can you tell us how it feels to win your first case at 17? Emma blinked in surprise at the camera. I wasn't trying to make headlines. I just wanted to help my brother. Are you planning to become a lawyer? Another reporter called out. Before Emma could answer, Professor Adams stepped in.
Emma Johnson is already well on her way to becoming one of the finest legal minds of her generation.
That's all we'll be saying today.
The professor guided Emma and Thomas through the crowd to a quiet corner of the courthouse.
Emma, Professor Adams said seriously, what happened today was extraordinary. But it's just the beginning of what you could accomplish. What do you mean? Emma asked.
I mean that Cambridge has a special scholarship program for exceptional students. Dean Preston and I would like to offer you a place, effective immediately. You could complete your formal legal training years ahead of schedule.
Thomas grinned widely. That's amazing, Em. Cambridge University. But Emma hesitated. What about Mum? And Thomas? I can't just leave them. Professor Adams smiled kindly.
The scholarship includes accommodation near campus where family can stay during visits.
And there are funds to help with your mother's travel costs. Emma's mind raced with possibilities. A proper legal education. A chance to really make a difference.
To help more people like Thomas who found themselves caught in an unfair system.
There's one more thing, Professor Adams added. Barrister Fletcher was so impressed with your performance that he's offered Thomas an internship at his law office. Paid, with flexible hours around his studies. Thomas's jaw dropped. Are you serious?
Very, the professor confirmed.
He believes family talent should be nurtured. Emma looked at her brother, who nodded encouragingly. Go for it, Em. You were born for this.
For the first time since entering the courthouse that morning, Emma allowed herself a full, genuine smile. What had begun as the worst day of their lives had somehow transformed into an unexpected doorway to the future. When do we start? She asked.